Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics who write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome our guest, Mark Weinstein, author of the book, Restoring Our Sanity Online, a revolutionary social framework. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be with you. It's great to be having this very important and very interesting conversation together. Thank you for inviting me. My
pleasure. So, Mark, let's start with you telling us about your professional background. How did you get to where you're at right now?
Okay, we want to keep it short and tight. So I am one of the inventors of social media. Now, that's a really big claim. So hear me, everybody. I said one of. There's probably 100 of us around the world in the 90s, in the mid to late 90s, that had this idea that email was already ghastly. We had email in the 90s for anybody who's young enough that they weren't there. We had email just exactly like we have email today. And it was as one-dimensional then as it is now. It's identical. So this idea that now we have all this new technology and we have the web, which was invented by a friend of mine, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, that we could get there. So, I had a conversation at the time with my 10-year-old nephew on a family vacation about how we could stay in touch as a family around the world using this great new technology. And within 10 minutes of the conversation, I told him I was going to start a new company. We're going to put it all together. And then I built Web1, superfamily.com, superfriends.com, PC Magazine, top 100 sites worldwide. That's really, and fast forward to Web 2, then I launched MeWe, and we've created the world's first privacy bill of rights for our members. We didn't target, there was no newsfeed manipulation, there was none of this algorithm BS. And then recently, about 4 years ago, I left MeWe to write the book, to scribe the prescription on how we fix the mess that social media is today. And that book came out in 2025, Restoring Our Sanity Online.
So let's start with chapter one. Well, let's start with chapter one. What lessons from the early Web 1 days, and it's interesting that you go back to the very beginning, and I remember all of this as well, should entrepreneurs revive today?
Well, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur, make sure that if you believe what you're doing, you stay the course. Because a lot of people, including family, friends, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, besties, may not agree with you when you tell them that you think this is the best thing in the world. So as long as you believe in what you're doing, then stick with it as long as you can. But when you doubt it and you don't believe, then get out. Because as Mark, and I were talking before the show, life works out. And so your life will work out. So don't be afraid of failure. Also, that's rather critical, Mark. Don't be afraid of failure, because failure is how we get to success. There is no other way. So, and back then, we didn't have the luxury of this amazing, AWS and the ways to host cheaply. So we had to build a huge server infrastructure. My first company I built in the state of New Mexico, the state government gave us a grant to stay. We had to build the largest commercial server infrastructure in the state of New Mexico to host all these, thousands, hundreds of thousands of members, et cetera, millions. Now you can just outsource that. So I would say, look for outsourcing wherever you can, and hire the best that you can. Do all these things that are critical, and make friends. One of my first board members said to me, all money is green. And in retrospect, I'm not sure all money is green. In other words, if you can pick your investors with some care, then do that. If you can't, then, money is green as long as you don't think they're going to corrupt your ability to raise other money, then go for it, because you need money.
How did you react when Mark Zuckerberg declared privacy is no longer a social norm?
Everybody, this is a true thing. Mark Zuckerberg, I think it was the Crunchy Awards in San Francisco in 2010, was interviewed on stage. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but basically he said, privacy is a social norm of the past, that we should all get over it. Because he had invented, really him and the Google guys, had invented something called surveillance capitalism, which was the economic model that was missing in Web 1 that is still with us today, is still part of what's called Web 2. My jaw dropped. I was like, are you kidding me? This is America. Privacy is an inalienable right of ours. So, and it's part of what makes democracy work. You can have your own thoughts. No one's going to spy on you. No one's going to tell on you, whatever. Civil discourse, everything. I was stunned, and I declared right there that I was going to start a new company to fix this problem, to compete with Facebook.
And yet Facebook has what? Almost half the world uses Facebook.
Facebook, listen, this is very interesting, everybody. Capitalism, I love capitalism because it inspires us to start things because we can be successful for ourselves, for our families, for our coworkers, for our co-founders. It's a great economic system. It has one flaw. Capitalism, unregulated, leads to monopolism. And this is why democracy is perfect as a marriage with capitalism, because in democracies, we regulate capitalism to support the free market. Now, what's happened is that Facebook became successful early on, right? They went public, they raised, millions and millions, tens, millions, billions of dollars. They bought out all their competitors. They put their competitors out of business. They took over the market for social media, for personal social media. There's actually an antitrust case in the United States. So what we need to do is just to be mindful of the fact, how did Facebook get so successful? How does Standard Oil get so successful? In every industry, Mark, there's a chapter in my book comparing big agriculture, big energy, and big tech, because the early successful companies they become monopolies, they squeeze out competition, they destroy the free market, and then we're stuck. So the world got stuck with Meta. Every survey that's ever taken about whether people like Facebook or not, the vast majority, usually it's 70 to 80%, are unhappy with Facebook. They're unhappy with their lack of privacy, etc. But it's called the network effect. All your friends are there. It's called your personal social graph. Everybody you're connected to is there. And you're stuck because they don't let you move easily, and your friends, it's impossible. Otherwise, everybody would have done it.
Which industry, food, energy, or tech, offers the best lessons for reform?
Well, they all do, because here's what happens. The monopolies reign, and then finally people get tired enough that they're inspired to start something, the solar energy, wind power, things like that are started by entrepreneurs. I worked for an entrepreneur while I was in graduate school, Newton Becker, who, personally helped finance the early solar energy power plants in the Mojave Desert. The major Southern California Edison, LADWP, no one was going to have anything to do with it. But he was able to pull it off, and moved California on the road towards solar power, wind power, etc. It takes entrepreneurs to start it. It never happens from within. Then the large monopolies will somehow come along for the ride. And interestingly enough, in an effort to maintain their monopolistic experience, they will then try and buy up all the entrepreneurial companies, as we've seen, even in the beverage industry, Honest Tea, everybody, Poppy, everybody gets bought up eventually by the larger corporations.
And I think most people hope that that's going to be the case, that will be their exit strategy, is the bigger company will end up buying them out.
Right, but what they've done is they've established a beachhead and proven that there is a demand and that there's a better way. And so they, by being entrepreneurs, are able to chip away at the establishment monopolistic system and bring in new methods. and new products that are better, that are healthier, etc.
Why is it important to see farming, energy, and tech as interconnected?
Well, what's important there, Mark, is that we get to see capitalism in its drive towards monopolism as interconnected. This has gone on for a long time. We also get to see the efforts in democracies, and I'm using the United States as an example. There's a history of antitrust, legislative and judicial branch efforts to slow down, to break up. AT&T was broken up, all these things. So right now we're looking at Google was found guilty of antitrust. This is very recent. This is this year, 2025, in the United States. So while the government has not broken up Google, but they've already issued a whole bunch of new rules about what Google can and can't do in their domination of the search marketplace. They're going to open it up for the free market for new companies to be able to survive and thrive. What's important to see about those three industries is they start off altruistic, just like social media did. Big tech
Yeah.
was like serving humankind. Whole idea, imagine, agriculture where we could build a community farm that feeds the community instead of everybody having their individual plot. That ultimately leads to the agribusiness, to startups, who now feed everybody, and we're completely dependent on them. Energy, same thing. It starts with a community figuring out how to generate energy for the community, and it ends up with Standard Oil was broken up a long time ago, but these large monopolies. So same thing in big tech. Big tech starts as, oh my God, it's the Holy Grail. This is amazing for all of us. But it immediately, capitalism moves to the path of monopolism naturally. And there's inherently nothing wrong with the fact that it does that, because that's what capitalism does by design. If you're great at something and there's nobody else there, or there are weak companies there, and you can get a boatload of investor money and you can go public, you can do whatever you do, you squeeze out the competition, because by nature, an enterprise is not ethical. It's not ethical saying, oh, we need to support you being here too. No, of course not. By nature, a capitalist enterprise wants, all the money for itself, wants all the customers for itself.
Self-interest.
Self-interest, right. Exactly.
Um, why or what were the early warning signs did you see of grassroots tech reform movement?
Well, you see it. Um, you see it in search engines. DuckDuckGo was and still is around as an alternative search engine to Google. Now, DuckDuckGo has also been very slow to grow. You look at, well, if they've really been a competitor, because they anonymize their users, they don't target their user, there's no personal targeting, there's no data gathering and collecting and selling of user data. But DuckDuckGo was very effective. DuckDuckGo also, with a small funding that they had, similar to MeWe, in the tens of millions, not the hundreds of millions and not the billions, the tens of millions, DuckDuckGo was able to run very effective, ad campaigns. And because search by nature is a pretty simple technical operation, they didn't have big overhead. So they were able just to survive, 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 survive. And then curiously, at some point, they actually licensed Google's ad model in an anonymized way. So they even were able to serve ads to their users that were not targeted by just licensing Google's ad model. So very interesting, but that's, I think DuckDuckGo is a particularly good example. There are other social media examples, because that search, Diaspora, then that which failed, unfortunately. MeWe, there were many. MeWe had many, many sort of nascent competitors that started and failed. And even Snap, who ultimately succeeds as a personal social media company, Snap didn't start that way. Snap started with disappearing content on your phones. They got in trouble because the photos didn't really disappear. They just went deep down into a folder. They were sort of found out. They moved into personal social media, Meta, Facebook, did everything to interfere with him. Snap created a dossier called Project Voldemort on what Meta did to interfere with him. But there are always, good guys trying.
Um, what early signs do you see? Well, what changes do you see from policy and entrepreneurs or consumers?
In the world of social media and also in the world of privacy, everybody, I'm one of the world's leading privacy advocates and also an expert on the matter. And here are the change. I've won awards for that, and been ranked number 4 in online, as an online privacy expert, things like that. But what we see, on the in the government side, we see something like in America called the Take It Down Act, which happened, this year with, help from, Congress, so that if someone is doing revenge porn or posting, unscrupulous photos of you, naked photos of you, whatever it is, you can tell a website, take that down, and they have 48 hours to do it. They have to do it. In the old days, they didn't have to. We have in America legislation that's waiting, that's standing by. COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, very important, bipartisan supported. It's stalled right now in Congress. There's no good reason for why it's stalled. COPPA 2, the the Children Online Privacy Protection Act. The first one was 20 years ago or thereabouts. This one is updated. These need to pass. So we need government, everybody. I am a free market person. I'm also a libertarian. I'm a free speech person. Let me give you the asterisks. Free speech in America means civil discourse. It doesn't mean saying, "Oh, all those people should be killed because I disagree with them." That doesn't mean all those people are terrible, or doesn't mean hate and inciting violence. Democracy functions on disagreement. And right now, the world is a little confused about that because that's the whole premise of democracy, everybody. The right to disagreement. Disagreement is the backbone of democracy, but civil disagreement. We use the ballot box to voice our opinions with a vote. So, and this is what we really, want to make sure that we continue to support.
How do you explain Web3 to someone brand new to it?
And Web3, because probably almost everybody on the call is brand new to it because it's completely still murky and undefined. But Web3 is fundamentally it's been proposed for a long time. And there's been pieces of it for a while. The idea is that it's built on blockchain, that it functions with the crypto, its currency, a medium of exchange is cryptocurrency. And while this is a good idea for financial transactions and things like that, where you really need to be careful about, the chain and the trace and the identity of, all the people involved. By the way, blockchain doesn't anonymize you. So if you're still thinking that that's true, that's false. It completely identifies you in a, eternal way. You'll always be known, as at the end of that chain. But Web3 for social media is a complete misappropriation of the technology, and it doesn't work for two main reasons. Number one, blockchain doesn't scale, not the way social media interactions scale. For financial transactions, that's fine, because that's really a one and done. But social media transactions are just ongoing, and then they branch and branch and branch and branch to, trillions and quadrillions of communications. Blockchain can't handle that. And the other thing is that Web3 is founded on monetizing your interactions. And that's, to me, an absurd premise. Social media is based on social engagement. We want to communicate with our friends and family. We want to seek out new ideas, new people with common interests, but we don't want to be up and down, thumbing up and thumbing down and spreading, giving them crypto, hey, giving mom crypto. Hey, mom, great post. Here's a little Bitcoin for you. That's a complete distraction and a misuse, and it's been tried and tested by Minds, Voice.com, Steam. It doesn't work at a scalable level. A couple million people might be involved, sure, but on a scalable level, social media is about communication, not about monetization.
What's the biggest misconception about Web3?
Well, that's interesting. I would say the biggest misconception of Web3 is that it's the successor to Web2. It's not. Web3 is really a little silo that has some functionality, particularly in the corporate world, because of how secure blockchain can be built. But the idea that Web3 is now superseding Web2, Web2 superseded Web1. Web3, a premise of Web3, which is very important, is control of your data. You don't need Web3 for that, by the way, but we do need control of our data. And so Web2, I believe, is now going to evolve. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, has invented a very cool thing called pods, solid pods, solid wallets, where you can actually download your content will not be hosted in the centralized system of the servers of a site that you're on. You'll control your data. You'll decide what goes up to that site, what comes down. You'll decide whether you're going to allow your data to be monetized and you'll share in that monetization or not. If you don't like a site that you're on, you'll be able to take your data off that site and move it easily. That's called data portability. So these are two critical aspects that are not critical. They're not really Web3, but they've been purported to be part of Web3. But the idea of data decentralization is a Web3 idea, but it functions fine in Web2 also. And now, data portability, or what we call data interoperability, we need some regulations around this so that we have a standard for the data packet that goes up and comes down, so we can move our data from a Meta to a MeWe to a new site to wherever we want, and our friends and family can do that too. Again, the network effect and your social graph are locked right now on Meta, and that's the only reason why they have half the world's population. Sorry, about three plus billion people. So there's a lot of exciting things we're right at the forefront on.
Where do you think AI fits into all this?
Well, AI. Now I've written a bunch about AI. I have also a chapter, a dedicated chapter, and talk a lot
Yep.
about AI in the book. So AI on social media, you guys, look, if you have an AI buddy on social media, it might feel good, and you need to snap out of it because that's a robot. That's simply a trained computer program that is stealing your information, that's getting all of your thoughts and your opinions and your feelings and feeding those straight into the data ecosystem. And then it's manipulating your thoughts and your opinions. And it's purposely, it knows exactly how to make you feel good about something, so you'll keep interacting with it. And also, this is why if you and or your friends or family, if you've noticed that you're stuck on YouTube or on Facebook or on Insta or on TikTok or on X or wherever you are, whatever social media platform you're on, your news platform, if you feel like you're stuck longer than ever, that's because AI is supercharging the algorithm that's watching everything you do, everything you read. It's anticipating your thought before you think it, because in the old days it was just a programmed algorithm. Now it's a learning tool in nanoseconds, watching and interacting with you, studying your psychology, your everything about you, your sociology, everything about you, and immediately adjusting what's next to keep you hooked. So
How
careful.
concerned should we be? Because I teach at a university, and one of the big questions parents and students are asking is, what should I major in, considering AI is taking over so many jobs? Where do I fit in? I mean, it's already bad enough you have global competition, but now you're not only competing against not humans, but now you're competing against the machine as well.
Listen, that's really the question of the day for a college student. Um, But there are a lot of, listen, there are a lot of service and other jobs. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a professor, you want to be whatever you want to be. You want to be in marketing, you want to be in advertising, you want to be a model, you want to be a designer. AI is not going to take away the creative function of a human being. AI is actually too pure, even when it's told, well, now write something, but make some mistakes so it looks more human. You want to be an engineer, you want to be what you want to be an entrepreneur. And of course, there are so many applications of AI. So, you can look at where is AI going and what human jobs are going to be needed to manage that. So I think this actually, it opens up a whole new world. People thought when computers came that was the end of the job market. Computers were going to make work so easy that we wouldn't, most jobs are just going to disappear. That's a bunch of baloney. What happens is the economy adjusts and evolves and adjusts and evolves. If you're into manufacturing, you're into mechanical engineering, if you're into, as I said, if you're an intellect, if you're a writer, or whatever it is, there are so many areas. You're an actor, you're in drama. AI is not going to take over this stuff. So, I think the fear, give us a few more years, and the fear is going to lead to the aha. Oh, AI needs tons of humans, and AI functions well here, but not there.
What pitfalls in Web3 concern you the most right now?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? I heard pitfalls and
In Web3 that concern you the most?
the pitfalls in Web3. It's interesting, everybody. Web3 is a sort of beautiful idea about getting back control of our data and things like that. But the pitfall in the belief of Web3, and we mentioned this a moment ago, is number one, people don't want to monetize their social media communications. And Web3 social media companies are built on the premise that you're going to want to be monetizing via cryptocurrency your communications. You're going to upvote, downvote, you're going to censor, you're going to have trust and safety based on, cryptocurrency, and everybody's going to participate. This is a flawed belief. And I think when you see the champions of Web3, they're often billionaires, by the way. These like meet your new boss, same as your old boss. They see the opportunity to launch a coin and make a bunch of money and get a whole bunch of people interacting with it. And the pitfall is that, yeah, you could probably get a couple million, crypto aficionados who will love to do this, to interact with each other and upvote, downvote, and make a coin valuable. That's great. But if you think you're going to get tens of millions of people doing that, the way they communicate now on a personal social media site, like a Meta or something like that, forget about it, because those people are communicating. These are their personal relationships. They're also people that they want to meet and talk to. They're not there to make a fractionalized money. They're there to be social. You don't go out for a beer with your friends to upvote them and give them a little piece of crypto. You go out to have a good time, to have a laugh, to talk about the world, talk about life. That's what we do on social media too.
What are the pitfalls that Web3 concern you the most?
Um, we just did that one, unless you want me to go further into it.
No, I'm sorry. What evidence show that Web3 is already repeating old patterns?
Well, I think now here's what's interesting about Web3. Another pitfall of Web3 is the belief that it could be engineered for social media and for scalable social media. Now, I had my teams work on that. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, had his, great, amazing engineering teams work on that. Doesn't work. Tim gave it up in 2022. He said, no, it doesn't work. Blockchain doesn't work as a massively scalable, code base, as a foundation for your code base. It doesn't work. We've just got to move on from that. So, Web3, listen, guys, we got to move to Web4. And that's what I talk about in the book. And Restoring Our Sanity Online, we talk about Web4. And I think that's rather critical, everybody. We've got to get away from this idea that Web3 is going to work. Web3 is great for certain applications, like I said, financial transactions, the insurance industry, lots of, B2B, lots of areas, banking, where blockchain is really great at making sure it can't be hacked and making sure that you know who's sending what to whom. The tracing. Blockchain's great for certain things, healthcare industry, privatizing information and data, but blockchain is the wrong, mechanism for social media.
When you talk about a better way, what's that look like for the average user?
For the average user, a better way is a better way. It's where, you're not creeped out anymore by the creep looking over your shoulder, where you control your data, where you have a great social experience, where you control your news feed. And in particular, what I prefer is a timeline news feed where I can just sort. Do I want to see posts in this order? Do I want to see my posts from people I'm following, from my friends, from my family? And I don't want an algorithm to decide which family member I should see first. I want them in timeline order. It's very simple. MeWe, which always had timeline order news feeds, was consistently ranked about 4.5 out of 5 in the scales, in the user rating scales at iTunes and the Play Store. Meta was, while I was CEO of MeWe, was always ranked about 2.3, 2.4 out of 5. People love timeline newsfeed. They love not being manipulated, not being tricked. That's what people want. So, the opportunity in Web4 for us to enjoy, the authentic communication, the opportunity to, not be manipulated, the opportunity not to have an algorithm manipulate our brains. Imagine this, where you can just critical think without, a crazy, AI supercharged algorithm tricking your brain. You know how you feel when you get off after you're stuck with an AI algorithm, when you're stuck with that news feed that never ends and keeps manipulating you, stay on for one more story. You don't feel good when you finally get up. You feel like yuck. You feel dirty almost. So, the opportunity for Web4 is what I call restoration networking, is a beautiful social networking experience where you're really connecting, where it's civil, um, where your newsfeed is not manipulated, where you're not tricked into buying things or voting for something you don't want to vote for or you don't want to buy, where there's no body shaming, where there's none of this manipulation to make you feel like there's something wrong. So you got to buy something to make it right. There's, Web4 is the idea of restoration networking, and Web4, this evolution. And there will be cryptocurrency there, as there will be fiat, but not voting up and down and doing all this stuff.
How can small startups realistically compete with big tech?
Well, first of all, you've got to be fleet of foot. You've got to understand guerrilla marketing. You've got to look for niches where you can attract users. Remember, there's two things as a small startup you want to be looking for. Three things, really: low overhead, revenue as quickly as possible, users as quickly as possible. And remember, users aren't going to be generating revenue for you unless they trust you. So you want to build a platform and an ethos. As I said at MeWe, we had a user privacy bill of rights. So, and then we had, it's called freemium. The freemium models work very effectively. So you want people to love what's free. You want them to learn to trust you. You've got to earn that right. And then you can upsell them with, additional features that they might enjoy, but they have to love what's free too. So, and again, so you're working on a shoestring budget, you're working on the fastest path to getting users, and then the fastest path to generating revenue.
So, how can ordinary users reclaim power online? And by the way, I don't, you probably remember this. The phone book had everybody's name and address in it. And if you didn't want for them to share your information, which you should own, you had to pay them extra for you not to be listed. Why did they
Right.
even get the right to list you to begin with?
Well, now it's an interesting question, but the phone book wasn't marketing to you. The phone book was looked at as a community service,
A
so
resource.
a resource so that we could call our neighbors so that we know, the kids, the parents of the kids who are in schools, all that stuff. That was the community. That was how community evolved. Now, today there are other sites like Nextdoor and things like that. If you want to join, you want to be anonymous, you want to let people know who you are. But what happened is the phone book wasn't used by the phone company to target and manipulate you. But when you're on one of these social media websites and the community is larger than your neighborhood, all they're doing is using your data because their whole revenue model is based on, you, being sold to the advertiser or marketer. Remember, in today's social media, in the Web 2 world, in surveillance capitalism, that's what it is, everybody. You have a great TED talk on this. Just look up Mark Weinstein, The Rise of Surveillance Capitalism, or Mark Weinstein TED Talk. So you're not the customer today on social media. You're the product that's sold to the customer. The customer is the advertiser, the marketer, the politician, the nefarious country entity who's ever paying for the bots and trolls. They're the customer. You're the product being sold to all of them. So the phone book analogy is really fascinating. It's a different era, and everybody got one. So,
Yep.
and you could opt out. You paid them like, $5-10, whatever it was, if you didn't want to be listed. So you had that option. You can't go on Facebook and say, don't target me. So, that's not an option. Remember, that's the exchange. What do they say today? Well, if the site's free, then obviously you're not the customer. So now at MeWe, at freemium, and I don't work at MeWe anymore, everybody. So I left because the problem is much bigger than one company. But you were the customer to serve, not the product to sell. And we've got to flip that back around. So new startups, make sure you know who your customer is and make sure you're clear with everybody about who the customer is and what the product is that you're selling.
Can what responsibilities come with being both a user and a creator?
So, look, creators are really a different breed. Of course, you're a user, but as a user, you're always creating content. So you're always a creator in that sense of the word creator, because you're creating content just like you do on a phone call. You're talking. That's content that you're creating. So, in the case of social media where you're posting, that's your way of talking. You're posting content. Um, so, again, it really depends where your content is going, but, and then we have the next, but that's, family, friends, that's groups that you're in, might be full of strangers. You're now a content creator. And then the next step up in content creation, which I talk a lot about for Web 4, because in Web 4, as everybody is a content creator and engagement is the key to success for a social media company. The longer that you're engaged, the more content you're posting. So I propose in Web 4 is that you also share in the profits of a Web 4 company based on your engagement. Now we see this in Web 2 where major content creators, I mean, the superstars of content creation, the YouTubers, TikTokers, people who are now making their living, they get compensated either by their users because they're selling sort of a premium access or whatever they're doing, or by the site themselves because the site wants them to be there generating engagement with millions of users so that site can make money by targeting and manipulating purchase decisions, opinions, boosting content, etc., into the news feeds of all those people. So in the world of being a content creator, your job is create interesting content, follow the rules of the site that you're on. And in the future in Web 4, you'll be able to, even if you're a smaller content creator, but you have good engagement in your family and friends, there's just a way of like you're like a shareholder. That's your way of being a shareholder. So you get to share in the profits too in a more minor way, but why not, right? You are the why the sites are successful.
How can ordinary users reclaim power online? It seems like you don't have any real choices here unless you just drop out of it.
Well, that's an interesting point because everybody, the first thing you want to do as a user, and I don't think, you're not, the word ordinary is interesting. And user is actually a strange word too, because user is a word that was always used for addicts. So I like to use the word member because you're a member. You choose to join, you're a member of this site, you're a member of that site. You're not a user, you're not a drug addict. And so you want to actually start to monitor your consumption. You're a member. So, remember, all these studies have been done. When people get off, when people limit their consumption, they're actually happier. They actually enjoy real life. So, as a member, monitor your consumption and like cut it in half. I mean, really. And put the phone away at night. Phones never in the bedrooms. Phones are charging somewhere else. And disconnect. And if your friends get pissed, you say, sorry, guys. You know what? My health, my happiness is way more important than having to see the latest conversation about who did what with whom and who's got a crush on whom and what are you do tomorrow. I'll see that tomorrow. And then at dinner time too. If you're a family, or if you're just hanging out with friends at dinner, phones away. And there's no excuse. It's not what my boss is calling me. You tell your boss. Everybody needs to know this is how you run. Are you going to get fired because you don't answer your boss at 8 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock, whenever your dinner is? Of course not. You're going to teach him or her a thing or two. Same thing with your family, same thing with your friends. They'll wait and they're going to be jealous. It's like, oh, geez, I should do that. Why am I stuck on my phone? So create new rules for yourself, guidelines, and remember, you're not a user. Users are addicts. You're a member. You have the power. You choose.
Do wallets empower users or trap them in a new system? These social media wallets.
Wallets don't really entrap them in a new system because you already have a wallet. You already can. Look, you've got Apple Pay, you've got Pay, you've got countless ways to pay for things online and to pay for apps and to pay for this and pay for that. You've got Venmo, you've got Zelle. Oh my God. So when you think about it, guys, a wallet is not going to entrap you, and wallets are going to get better. And then you'll be able to have your fiat currency in them. Tim Berners-Lee has developed something called solid wallets. Now, these wallets function beautifully. They protect your data. They have user ID verification where you need it, and they protect your financial resources, your money. If a site has a dedicated wallet, it's not going to be just for that site. So I wouldn't be afraid of a wallet. And in fact, I want you to understand and to be encouraged that soon you're going to have these things are all going to interact together. This is the era of separate Venmo, separate Zelle, separate Apple Pay, separate Google Pay, and separate your crypto in somewhere altogether different. These are going to coalesce. Your banking is somewhere different. This is going to coalesce into an integrated wallet system. That's clearly what's coming. Embrace that technology. Embrace the ones that are good with careful protections, just like your bank has protections and Venmo has protections. This is the way of the world. And don't worry about if you have a wallet. It's going to work.
Um, could wallets change platform user relationships?
Um, because you can pay so many ways on platforms for different things already. If you're subscribing, you're buying that special content from a creator you follow or things like that. The original thought I think was that a wallet would kind of lock you in, a particular wallet to one site, but they won't, because a wallet won't function well like that. So as wallets emerge, online wallets essentially, but we're already online with all our banking and everything. I think this is just a bunch of smoke about nothing. So, these wallets are going to be broad-based. As I said, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, his Solid wallet, I think is a great choice. Um, as you look at how to manage your financial resources, and as you look at if there's some sites now that you're going to get some cryptocurrency on for one reason or another, etc. And I know there's crypto aficionados that like to pay with crypto anyhow. So a wallet that functions with fiat, which is, currency, whatever currency of your country or the dollar, and crypto, a wallet that can have, different ways for you to function and pay, that's great.
Question from the audience. What are the revenue models for Web3 and Web4?
So Web3, to our listener, Web3 and to everybody, Web3 revenue model is really based on cryptocurrency and based on the transaction fees that cryptocurrency generates for a site. So, what they do is they launch a coin. Now, in the treasury, the company has a whole bunch of these coins for themselves, but they now issue coins to all their members. Now, the idea is their members start to use those coins in transactions between themselves and in purchases on the site, and then the coin starts to develop an inherent value. Now, that site's treasury has all these coins sitting in it, and all of a sudden they have some value. And so that's just a basic fundamental start of how a Web3 company develops revenue. Also, every interaction, every exchange of a user, of a member, exchanging cryptocurrency on the site, upvoting, downvoting, or buying something, the site gets a fee for processing that transaction. So this is why the Web3 revenue model looks very attractive to Web3 companies. Web 4 comes back to a sort of blended where, Web 4 can serve creators in a really great way, help creators build content, build, revenue platforms because creators like to do that, big creators. And again, a Web 4 company can take a piece of the action, a transaction fee for doing that, but a Web 4 company functions with the user, the member, as a customer to serve. So Web4 companies are all about the customer bill of rights. The Web4 members participate. They have an advisory, a customer advisory panel. They participate in trust and safety. They participate in making recommendations to the site. Web4 is a different, now I'm talking about Web4 personal social media. That's what I'm talking about. So these Web4 companies, the restoration network companies, and also the member of a Web4 company, you can have targeted advertising in a Web4 company. The member opts into that. The member chooses to share their data. A Web4 company is based on user control of data and on a standard protocol for the user putting their data on the site, putting content on the site, or taking it off and moving somewhere else. It holds the site accountable to really serve the member. Web4 companies are conscious capitalist companies. They could be B Corps or just great, pure capitalist companies that are designed to serve their members and therefore be very profitable.
Have you seen examples of executives using power responsibly?
Well, of course, all of us have seen examples of executives who we admire and respect and use power correctly. Gabe Weinberg over at DuckDuckGo. I think historically, Tim Cook has been a great a champion of privacy. And I think the way he's used his power as a champion of privacy, boy, he used to go, in public spats with Mark Zuckerberg and just take Mark Zuckerberg down and take Eric Schmidt down about their egregious violation of personal privacy. And this is what we want to see, what we like to see. There's a whole slew. There's tons of what are called B Corps now. Their whole
Yeah.
purpose is to serve the member. There's conscious capitalism companies. My friend Raj Sisodia is the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. Same thing. You've got the Container Store, you've got Southwest, you've got Patagonia, you've got so many countless great examples. Whole Foods before they sold to Amazon. Raj wrote the book, with the founder of Whole Foods about, how to build a highly ethical company that serves its customers.
How can users and employees hold leaders accountable?
So, it's always, vote with where you put your money, vote with where you work. So, you have a choice. Don't get stuck at a company or in a job where you are feeling badly every day, where you're feeling, like dirty, you're feeling slimed, you're feeling like, I don't agree with these guys. Make your voice heard and or leave. Find another job with a company whose ethos, whose integrity matches what you think, how you want to feel as both the customer and as the worker. So, that's the best thing you can do, either as an employee or as a customer. If you don't like, this is why we see in a supermarket, certainly in America, you can look at a container of milk and you can see whose milk is organic, whose milk is made without, with cows that are not fed hormones, et cetera, et cetera. You can look at the products, you can research the companies. So there are countless great, amazing companies that you can either work for or be a customer of.
Can anonymity and accountability coexist online?
I think it's really, anonymity and, well, that's a really good question. I talk about privacy. It's hard to hold somebody or something accountable if you don't know who or what they are. Are you about to troll? What are you? So this is where user ID verification. I'm a huge privacy guy, and I say, just like the governments of Australia and now Spain's looking at it in other places, I say we need user ID verification now for our children. So we need to protect kids. First of all, we need to make sure that you're a kid, and so that we can have laws that protect you as a kid. And so for all social media and all sites that are serving, children, I think kids should not be on social media or even YouTube until they're 13, unless there's a parent right there with them. But we need to verify that they're kids and make sure there's no creeps, no bots and trolls, no targeted marketing, no manipulated newsfeed, no AI manipulation, etc. For anybody up to the age of 18.
Question from the audience. You said that if someone writes defamatory stuff about a person on Facebook, you have a right to get it removed by telling them as per the Privacy Act. Can you tell which Privacy Act it is? You
Yeah, that's
mentioned
not what I said.
earlier in your talks, but I missed it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a misunderstanding. This is called the Take It Down Act. It's in the United States. This is about images. This is about revenge porn, it's called. This is about somebody, a boyfriend and girlfriend, somebody posting, naked, pornographic, unsightly images of you trying to get back at you. That's what you can ask the sites to take down. It's called the Take It Down Act. It's really targeted at revenge porn and all the areas around that so that you're not stuck with some terrible photographs of you that are embarrassing that could lead you to lose your job or lose friends and that are, just shouldn't be there. You can get those taken down. The rule's 48 hours or sooner. And by the way, if the site doesn't take them down and you've alerted them, you followed the mechanism, then that site gets in trouble. They get fined big time.
Yeah, I remember running a site and somebody mentioning that to us. What trade-off between privacy and safety is acceptable?
Well, everybody, it's really not the trade-off with privacy and safety. It's the trade-off with privacy and anonymity. We must protect our privacy. We must be able to have our private thoughts, our private conversations, and those we must not have AI or sites slurp those up. Because remember, even a site like Facebook, if it's on your phone, it's listening to everything you do. And this was documented by the Wall Street Journal in like 2016. We're going back like 9 years now, everybody, that Facebook was collecting data and tracking non-users just like they were doing users and developing data packets, feeding into what's called the data ecosystem, this massive data system that all companies have access to. So what we need now is to protect privacy, but we also need to know who's a bot and troll because we need to protect democracy. And democracy is being disrupted. This is well documented. It's been documented for years. It's being disrupted by bots and trolls and bots and troll farms and nefarious entities in nefarious countries that are determined to make people in democratic countries hate each other instead of just disagree. And you see that this is what's happening. So we need to make sure that whoever is posting hate or an opinion that inspires hate, that's a real person. And as long as they're following the site's rules, fine. But a site needs to know that's not a real person. We need to know if someone is real or not. We need to stop this disruption of democracy, this disruption of critical thinking by bots and trolls. And remember, there are billions of them, tens of millions of them. It was well documented that half of Elon Musk's followers are bots and trolls. And even when Biden was president, it was well documented that half of his followers are bots and trolls. So why doesn't the site do something about this? It's very clear. The more engagement, the more money they make. Bots and trolls can be programmed to have access to credit cards. They can get blue checks. So we're going to have to get good AI on this case and weed it out.
Should government manage ID verification, or is that yeah, it's like old style communism?
Well, listen, I've been a privacy guy for a long time, and I used to attend government meetings where they wanted to develop government ID systems, and I would just basically yell at these guys and say, "You guys are crazy. Privacy is critical." This is before the era of bots and trolls. So now we're in the era of bots and trolls. So we need to have, and this is, by the way, a great opportunity for you entrepreneurs out there, develop a good, secure user ID verification system that can work, not just in America, but around the world. But remember, here's what I start the conversation with. User ID verification for our kids. We've got to know that these are our kids, and then we've got to protect them. We've got to make sure that a bot and troll or a creep pretending to be 13, it has no access to, our kids online, any kids online. So,
So,
yeah.
we're down to maybe our last question here. What does effective digital activation look like in 2025 and beyond?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what effective digital activation means if we're talking about
Activism.
activism.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody, you want to start seeking out startups that are aligned with your thought processes, that have products that you think you'll enjoy and your friends will enjoy. People are ready. You can ask your friends. Everybody's ready. Everybody's exhausted by Facebook. They're overwhelmed by TikTok and Insta, and they don't need as much of it. X, all these places. So, there's an opportunity. Activism means, being a member of sites that support your ethos, that support your privacy, that, ask you if you want targeted advertising, if you want to share in the revenue that they earn from using your data, things like that. If they have a really great, innovative product or service, and we really haven't seen a lot of innovation in the last few years, because we're sort of like in this plateau of technology. So it can be a different X, a different sort of a town square where it's civil. and civil discourse is the rule. You can have an opinion. At MeWe, I let anybody talk about vaccines, but not talk about hating each other, but talk about vaccines. When Facebook was shutting down vaccine conversations in groups during the COVID era, and I was like, look, this is democracy. Disagreement is the backbone of democracy, but not hate, not vitriol, not inciting violence, not saying that person should be killed because their opinion is different than yours. No, that's not, and people don't like that. Good people want to be able to voice their opinion, to enjoy learning about cooking, sports, following all the great stuff. Have fun. I love social media. I'm one of the inventors of it. I love it. It's fun. It's delicious. It's great. It's a way to stay connected in a loving and harmonious way. Find sites that nurture, your soul and not manipulate your mind.
Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us. Your book was very good for starting conversation and having people come in with their eyes open, and with the idea that creating a positive town square where you can really share ideas without threatening the other person bodily harm because you don't agree with them. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this book with us.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for your time, too. Thank you.
And Mark, Happy New Year to you as well.
Likewise. Thank you, Mark. Same to you.
Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Cheers, everyone.